The views and opinions expressed by the individuals in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of its producers, Metaphor Creative Media, its management, or affiliates.
As police officers, we're witness to some of the most amazing things in life. Some comical, some horrendous, and some just plain miraculous. When asked why you went into law enforcement, most officers will tell you, because it's like having a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. Today, we saved you a front row seat. This is Copservations.
From Broadcast Beat Studios in Oakland Park, Florida, Metaphor Creative Media presents a show that gives you a personal glimpse of what law enforcement officers see and do in their typical and not so typical day of work. From walking the beat to detective, Rob has 35 years of law enforcement experience. Although the staff are all active or former law enforcement, any views, opinions, and all other show content are in no way official views, statements, or policies of any law enforcement agency. To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677.
Hello and welcome to Copservations, your front row seat to the greatest show on earth. In case you didn't know it, my name is Anthony. I'm one of the show's creators and producers. Rob's out of town this week, so tonight I have the pleasure of sitting in for him. How about that? We're going to try something a little new and a little bit different tonight. My partner and co-producer, Danny, has no clue about what I'm about to do, but that's not true anymore because he read my transcript.
Next time, don't leave it out.
So we're going to switch things up a little bit and see if we can integrate the control room with tonight's broadcast. So Danny, tonight you're my co-host from inside the control room. So why don't you say hello to everybody out there? We got Brandon and Alexis. Alexis is sitting in for now to answer any phone calls and pay attention to our social media. Brandon, my boy Brandon's in there. He's running the teleprompter and soundboard for now. And Ashley's on her way. So that's one of the advantages of being the creative developer and the guy who formats the show. So I get to say, you know, Danny, you're the co-host today from the control room. This should be fun. The show is broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and now on Twitter. And you could reach us there at Copservations, @Copservations _. And we're broadcast from the Broadcast Beat Studios located in Oakland Park, Florida. And here on Copservations, we attempt to give you a personal glimpse of what law enforcement officers go through on a daily basis. We also talk about recent events, happenings, and the latest hot topics pertaining to law enforcement that not only affect law enforcement officers, but you, the general public, as well. If you have any questions, comments, or a story you'd like to share, join the conversation by giving the podcast studio a call toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. And you can also instant message your questions and comments live on our Copservations Facebook page. So we'll have that monitored in there in the control room. And if you have any questions, they'll send them our way, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. So last week, Rob memorialized his friend and coworker, Detective Dennis Murphy of the NYPD, who passed away as a result of 9/11-related cancer. Dennis was a crusader in the fight to renew the 9/11 Victims' Compensation Fund, a fund that is so desperately needed, especially now, as a grim new released statistic highlighting just how important it was to pass that legislation. Officials have recently reported that as of September 11th of this year, 241 New York Police Department officers have passed, and 204 FDNY personnel have died from 9/11 related illnesses. It's been 18 years since the attacks. It's absolutely horrifying. If you didn't get to tune into last week's show, you missed a very informative conversation with our guest, Manny Christofios. He's going to kill me. How do you say it, Danny? You're Greek. Christofios. Right? Okay. He's the commanding officer of the Sheriff's Office K-9 unit. I've been in law enforcement almost 25 years, and I've never known about some of the things that Manny had touched on. And coincidentally, lately there have been all kinds of canine stories that have been highlighting the news, including one about Conan, the canine who was responsible for tracking down ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. So it was a rather fitting topic and a great show. Those dogs are really amazing. And we received lots of feedback on it, and we thank you for that. So if you missed last week's Hero Canine special, or any of our other episodes, you can catch up by going to the Copservation podcast channel, located on the Metaphor Creative Media YouTube page, where you will find all of our previous episodes. Tonight's topic is violent extremism and law enforcement's use of community policing to counter it. This isn't as easy as I thought it was. Tonight's guest is a deputy sheriff rescue diver, a member of the crisis intervention team, homeless outreach specialist, and a field training deputy with the sheriff's office. His background includes extensive research, study, and specializing in CVE, countering violent extremism, working hand in hand with the Department of Homeland Security as a subject matter expert for the last 5 years, and traveling all around the world and training other governments and law enforcement agencies how to work together. My guest is Nezar Hamze. Nezar?
Hey, thanks for...
Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to Copservations.
Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate the invitation. And I'd like just to give you guys a quick shout out. Your studio is very impressive. It's
Thank you.
It's beautiful. It's high tech. I've been to dozens and dozens of studios, and I'm very impressed. So again, thanks for having me.
I really appreciate that, Hammer. We take a lot of pride in what we do here, and it's an ongoing process. We're still, building and expanding, and I know Ryan is very happy with the place, and we take a lot of pride in it. So we really appreciate that very much.
I can tell.
So in case you don't know, Hammer or Nezar and I, we do work together, and on the road working together, I happen to call him Hammer. So if I happen to, say Hammer, that's who I'm referring to, because that's his nickname that we have for him out on the. And you probably don't need to know why we call him Hammer. I rely a lot on him as a backup, and it's great to have him behind us. So as is custom with the show format, I'd like to touch on some recent events in the news pertaining to law enforcement and discuss these events a little more in depth for just a bit before we move on to tonight's topic. First up, New York Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez appears to be encouraging toll jumping in the New York City metro system. Anti-NYPD protesters swarmed a Brooklyn station and leaped over the turnstiles without paying subway fares on Friday in protest of the NYPD. Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "Ending mass incarceration means challenging a system that jails the poor to free the rich. Arresting people who can't afford a $2.75 fare makes no one safer and destabilizes our community. New Yorkers know that, they're not having it, and they're standing up for each other." Almost 1,000 protesters marched in Brooklyn on Friday to air their grievances against the NYPD, claiming that police brutality, as well as fare evasion enforcement plans against toll jumpers who avoid paying the $2.75 fare. The protest was triggered after 2 separate subway station incidents involving law enforcement officers in physical altercations. The first incident involved several police officers tackling a 19-year-old black man after it was thought that he had a firearm on him. He was later found to be unarmed, but was charged with theft of services. The second incident involved an officer breaking up a fight between 2 groups on a subway platform, and ultimately wound up punching 2 black teenagers in the brawl. Additionally, protesters complained about New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's plan to add 500 more officers to the patrol of the transit system and arrest fare evaders. Yet back in February of 2018, Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance announced that the borough would cease prosecuting subway fare jumpers, claiming 2/3 of all those arrested in Manhattan for fare evasion had no prior convictions. Additionally, Vance argued that a judge issued no criminal punishment on anyone who pleaded guilty. At the time of Vance's announcement, NYPD officers told Police Commissioner James O'Neill that during that week, prosecutors refused to prosecute fare jumpers with extensive records in at least 5 cases, including one fare evader who was previously arrested 52 times. By the end of 2018, Metropolitan Transit Authority had already lost $215 million as a result of fare evaders. Which leads us to this little discussion about this topic.
Yeah.
It's tough because we're stuck between a rock and a hard spot as law enforcement officers and enforcing the laws. And when does it become okay to commit a crime? When does that begin, and how far can you go before it becomes okay, or before it's no longer okay to commit that crime? So you understand, like...
Yeah, I know the rules of the show. I don't know. I know we can touch a little bit politically, but it seems that AOC was challenging our criminal justice system by encouraging people to break the law. So I don't. Obviously, I wish you wouldn't do that. That's something that puts everybody in danger and puts law enforcement officers in danger. It puts the public in danger. She's a legislator. She should change the law.
Right.
So if she wants to do something,
Right.
stop talking, stop encouraging people to break the law, and do something about it as a
Exactly.
legislate, right? So it's an unfortunate thing that she did, and people got hurt, and a lot of people got arrested, and it's it's unfortunate that we have lawmakers encouraging people to break the law.
Right.
It's sad.
Yeah, and one thing that I caught about the story in itself was they make mention that officers attacked him or jumped on him because they thought he had a gun, and then they later charged him with fare evasion. Like the fare evasion was a subsequent charge. Like they went after him to begin with because of fare evasion. He jumped the turnstile.
Yeah, he broke
and
the
they
law.
went after him. But
Yeah.
no mention in that story until at the end when they say he was charged with fare evasion. I mean, it's really this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't really depend on the media to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I agree.
I think we've learned that. Over the
Yeah,
years.
well, I think we've all. I mean, in our field, in our,
Of course.
as law enforcement officers, we know the way that works, and we just have to move on in our day-to-day
Yeah.
duties as the law enforcement officers.
Yeah.
So,
But it is, I'll say it's unfortunate for a lawmaker to tell people to break the law. It's very irresponsible. I'm not sure why she made the decision. If she has a problem with the criminal justice system, then I've been around the world, right? And no system is perfect, but I can tell you, God bless America, and I love this criminal justice system. Not saying it can't use improvement, but she should legislate.
yes,
Stop telling people to break the
absolutely.
law.
And another thing I feel is I feel that a lot of these people took advantage of a situation, and it's not that I don't have a problem with if you can't afford your fare.
Yeah.
If somebody needs something and they can't really afford it. Most of these protesters, it wasn't that they couldn't afford the fare. They jumped these turnstiles in protest. It's still committing. You're still committing a crime. You
Correct,
gotta
yeah.
pay your fare.
Yeah.
And if you don't have fare to get through, that's one thing. But when you just jump it because you can,
Yeah.
then that's
Well,
when
I have
start
never
having a
been, to New York, but I know a lot of our friends have, a lot of my coworkers, and I would imagine that the law enforcement officers on the ground are a lot like us.
Yeah.
And if someone walked up to them and said, "Hey, I need to get here and I can't go,"
Sure.
I'm sure that the officers would help that person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of people don't realize that, but it's unfortunate. Yeah.
Yep, that's a tough one. The next story from Dayton, Ohio, is about George Del Rio. He's a 30-year Dayton, Ohio police officer who was critically injured Monday after being shot in the face while serving a search warrant at a Dayton home. Officer Del Rio was placed on advanced life support at Grandview Medical Center, the Dayton Police Chief Richard Beal said. Officer Del Rio, who joined the department in 1989, has served and positively changed countless lives because of his work to remove dangerous drugs and narcotics from the streets. Beal, who choked back tears while discussing the shooting, and the wounded detective said, his work had impacted regionally, nationally, and internationally. He was that good, and what he did, he loved what he did. Officer Del Rio's professionalism and work quality exemplifies the Dayton Police Force's mission, Beal said. Del Rio's injuries are grave, and we ask the community to keep the detective and his family in its thoughts and prayers, the chief said. Beal said Del Rio's family, including his wife, children, and grandchildren, gathered at his hospital Monday night. They are all deeply affected by this, he said. Clearly, they wanted to be with him. They wanted to be there to support him, rooting for him, pulling for him, praying for him. Del Rio, 55, was sworn into the police department on March 9th of 1989. In May of 2000, he became a DEA task force officer in the Narcotics Bureau. During his career, he received 7 written commendations, 2 letters of appreciation, and 1 unit citation. Del Rio put his life on the line every day for the city and this community, said Keith Martin, special agent in charge of the Detroit Field Division of the DEA. Del Rio's shooting was senseless and tragic, and is an attack on this community and its justice system, said Montgomery County Prosecutor Matt Heck. My heartfelt sympathies are extended to the Del Rio family, but also to Chief Beal and the entire Dayton Police Department, Heck said. So, this is this topic, and I don't like to say this, no fear of law enforcement, no second guessing or thinking twice about jumping out at a police officer, pulling a gun at a police officer, shooting a police officer.
Yeah.
Has got me, I'm absolutely horrified. I am horrified because growing up, I grew up in the streets of Long Island, in New York. The last thing I wanted to do as a young man, especially growing up in an Italian/Puerto Rican family, was have an encounter with a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
Not only was I worried about the law enforcement officer because you just didn't want to have a run-in with him, but then I was worried about what happened to me after my parents found out that I had a run-in with the law enforcement officers. So but nowadays there is no. It's almost like there is no fear. There is no, and I'm not saying that law enforcement officers need to have fear or instill fear in people. We're not out there to instill fear in people. However, you need to know that if your actions there are going to be ramifications if they are not lawful, and if you attack a law enforcement officer. I mean, the line has to be drawn somewhere.
When I started in 2012 in law enforcement, and I know we'll get into that later, but the director of the academy, he was a retired chief from Kansas, and he told me, as we were going into the introduction and talking about the life of a law enforcement officer, he told me that, he said, Hamze, the law enforcement has changed so much over the last 2 decades that I don't recognize it when I first started to where it is now. And he told me, he said, by time you leave and you get on the road and you start working, you won't recognize it from this day, from everything that we're teaching you until the next.
It's almost like you can't keep up with it. Huh?
Yeah, in my generation, growing up, you guys have been, are giants that we're standing on the shoulders of, and in my generation of law enforcement, when I grew up, there was a respect for law enforcement. Right. When I saw a law enforcement officer, I would say yes sir, no sir, really I never wanted to see a law enforcement officer. That means I was fucking around and, getting in trouble. But there was a respect, for law enforcement. And I still do see quite a few citizens that have that respect. I do see it.
I'm not saying it's not there.
Yeah.
It is there, and it's sometimes when I'm at my not my lowest, but I'm at the point where I'm thinking all hope is lost. I always end up to having somebody come up to me and say thank you for your service, and that kind of snaps me out of my little which is you're still appreciated out there, and I'm not saying we're not appreciated out there.
I feel it. But there are, like you said, there are people that are very aggressive towards law enforcement. Very aggressive. And we don't work in the best neighborhood, where we work, and we've had many instances where our fellow deputies, even myself, I was attacked with a knife, and deputies, people shooting at us, and there is a certain group in society. There's a small group in society that don't really respect law enforcement, and it's very easy for us to identify them.
Right.
And our safety is very important. I want to go home. You want to go home.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're out there. It's unfortunate. But I'm still holding on. I still see the people that respect us and work with us and support us. And we just have we have to, we're protectors for a reason.
Right. Exactly. And you got a long way to go. I mean.
Yeah.
Thank God I'm in the drop. That's all I gotta say. But anyway, I work with a great bunch of guys. I really love working with you guys. We have a really good crew that we work with.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt that any one of us wouldn't be there for each other.
Of course.
At the time when we need it the most. So
in a split second.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely a great crew to work with. I love it.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the next story. Montgomery County, Maryland Police. This one bothers me a little too, because we're dealing with children, and we mold them the way we want. We're trying to teach them as they're growing up right from wrong, good from bad, some morals, some respect, some, and this story just absolutely, I don't know why, or what's going on there, or whether there's an underlying thing, but this story really, really bugged me. So, in Maryland, police say that a wooden American flag, made and gifted by a local child resident, James Shelton, in recognition of National First Responders Day, will not be publicly displayed. The department initially said in a tweet that the thin blue line flag would be displayed at the 5th District Station for National First Responders Day. However, the department later tweeted a message from Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrick, who said that the flag will not be displayed because it is divisive. The flag provides a symbol of support to some, but it is a symbol of dismissiveness to others, the tweet reads. Because it is divisive, the flag will not be posted at the 5th District, nor in any other public space within the police department. So,
hey, Tony?
Yep.
The flag will always be displayed on our show.
Absolutely. Proudly. I am so torn with this. I mean, I understand I will just say this. There's a bad apple, or there are bad apples in every profession, job. We're human. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
A lot of us will make minor mistakes, correct them, move on. Those with experience will learn from it. The really good ones will accept their fault and move on. And I am a firm believer in that. And I can tell you instances where I'm not perfect. Believe it or not, I'm not perfect, Danny. Sorry.
I can attest.
Hey, hold on. That's not what you've been telling us. You've been fucking lying to us.
Damn it. It's out. But 25 years is a long time to work. for an agency or as law enforcement and have a smudge-free record.
Yeah.
Because you learn. I mean, in the beginning you learn, and a lot of the stuff that you learn in the beginning you apply in your drop years, or when you're getting close to your retirement years. A lot more common sense, a lot more. We always will have empathy, but until we really live that time, like it's hard to explain. Until we really experience what people are going through, like the two people in our city last week.
Yeah.
Until you experience that and actually feel your empathy, you can always say, yeah, I empathize with them, until you've done this for a long time. Can you really say, I empathize with you? It's easy to teach them. It's easy to say you have to have empathy. But it takes a lot of experience before you actually feel that and training. And so as far as people being offended by this flag, I understand. You got to take it in totality. What we stand for, what as law enforcement officers stand for, why we put on the badge and the gun belt and everything, and why every day, after all the stuff we go through, we still choose to get up in the morning, put on the badge, put on the belt, get in the car, go, protect. And one of the biggest things, and I've even told my kids this, no matter what happens to you that day, it can be one person that gives you the worst day of your life. That person can say things, can do things to you, can just absolutely have no respect for you. Tomorrow, if that person calls 911, you will, without hesitation, respond to that person's house.
Yeah.
And take care of business for that person.
You're right.
There is no other profession that will do that.
Yeah.
And not only that, but before you go to his house again when he calls the next day, you have to go home and you have to digest all that stuff. And then you got to deal with your family, and it's a very delicate balancing act that takes a long, long time to do. But regardless of that, and I've told people to their face too, listen, you may think that of me, but tomorrow if you call me, I'm going to be there to help you.
I in the different hats that I wear for the time, and we'll speak about that a little bit, I guess, in the future of different parts of our conversation.
Yeah, we're going to get
that. I've heard this narrative, and I guess basically what happened in this example that we were discussing before, and what you just read to the viewers here, is that there's such a divide between the community, right? They don't want to recognize or let the police recognize themselves as first responders with our American flag with the thin blue line on it. And I have a lot of experience with these groups, and like I said, I know we want to get political, and at some times I'd engage in conversations with them because of the work that I'm doing, and they would actually say out loud, I can't think of one thing that I would call 911 for, and that's how far. I don't want to say left or right, but that's how far they've gone.
Right.
Right. And you sit down and you have a conversation with them, and I say, let me tell you something. Have you ever been to a house, or somebody where the father raped their daughter, and their face goes blank? I said, have you ever been where somebody robbed an old lady sitting in a graveyard, worshiping her son, and she got crying over her son that died in the military, and some thug comes up to her and robs her? Have you ever incidents of that's happened in our city? I said with that. Have you ever experienced that? I said, so don't sit on your high horse and tell me that you don't know why you would call 911. Right. I said, I understand that you have some grievances, and there are some things that you would want to see different, but don't say that, because you're putting a lot of other people in danger when you say that, encouraging them to call. So, I get it. I understand, but it's crappy.
Yep. And we still, every day we deal with situations And at least once a week, we run into a situation, or I have run into a situation, where somebody would actually tell us to their face, "We don't need the police. Nobody
Yeah.
wants the police here. We don't need you.
Yeah.
You know, just go away. I didn't call you."
Okay.
You know, but I don't know. I'm just I'm flabbergasted because, like I said, we still will go and help these people regardless of how much they
Hate us.
hate us.
Yep.
Pretty much.
We'll still be there.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, well, as a reminder, if you have a question, comment, or a story you'd like to share, join the conversation. And I want you guys to call. Nobody is calling me. I want you guys to call. There is no excuse for it. I know there's a lot of you out there, but I want a phone call, at least a phone call in the next segment, or else I'm coming after you. No, I'm just kidding. So you can give the podcast studio a call toll free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into tonight's topic with Hammer, countering violent extremism. And we'll be right back. Join us.
If you or someone you know would like to appear as a guest on the show, you can book your appearance on the Copservations Facebook page, or you can email the show directly at copservations@yahoo.com.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down.
It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
You all right, girl? You cool?
You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them.
Go on, Kelly. It's easy awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org. How to know if you should reach out to a friend. Your friend might be. How to continue the talk with your friend about their mental health after you ask about how they were feeling. Put down that phone. Do it. Nobody's texting you. Phone down. Good. Now it's time to listen. If they're not ready to talk yet, check back in later.
I'm always here if you want to talk. Okay?
That was great. Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org. Awkward.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. Now back to our host.
Welcome back to Cop Reservations. Tonight's discussion is countering violent extremism with our guest Nezar Hamze. Hammer, before we move on to our topic, we like to get to know a little bit about our guests.
Okay.
And we like to ask them a few questions. So if you don't mind, I'm going to shoot some your way, and let's get to know you. We'll let the audience get to know you. So prior to law enforcement, what did you do before you became a law enforcement officer?
Prior to law enforcement, I was involved in nonprofit management and big box retail operation and multi-unit management. So I was district manager, regional manager for CarMax, for Lowe's Home Improvement, Pep Boys. You know, you've heard of the auto industry.
Really?
I was in multi-unit management for them.
Wow.
That was my background. You know, so a lot heavy, operations, human resources, things like that.
Very good. Did you have a degree in that?
No, I just studied business, regular undergrad degree, and and then I got involved with law enforcement.
Very good.
You know, do with that.
And so why law enforcement? Why did you get into law enforcement?
As I said, I was in nonprofit. I was involved in nonprofit management. I was the director, executive director at the time for Care Florida. It's a civil rights organization for the Muslim community, and I was volunteering for the sheriff's office as a chaplain. For the chaplain's office, and I would go. Specifically, what I was doing is they were asking me for help. There were some inmates that, some can request a religious diet, which is a better quality food, costs the taxpayers more money.
Right.
So the chaplain's office would ask me to, come in and help them, with that program to make sure they weren't getting taken advantage of, basically.
Oh.
That's how the relationship started. I started, and then obviously in my role in the nonprofit, I was a community leader, and I interacted a lot with Lamberti's administration back then. It was back in 2011 when that started at the chaplain's office, and then I was recruited. They recruited me to. They said, hey, you'd be a really good deputy. You speak well. You have integrity. You represent your community well. Why don't you join us?
Very good.
I did. So, and that was back in 2012.
So before that, you had no thoughts until somebody suggested to you, hey, come on board.
Yeah,
become a law
it
enforcement
wasn't.
officer.
I mean, as a child,
Well, yeah, everybody, yeah.
That kind of crosses your mind, but. Until I mean, and I didn't make my decision right away. It wasn't an overnight decision, but when they started talking to me and I started really thinking about, my future and what I wanted to do and the example I wanted to set for my children, and everyone always tells me, you look like a cop. Every time everywhere I go, they say, are you in the military? Because you look like a cop. So that's how I got started. I was volunteering, serving the community, and that's how I got started. I got recruited.
And that was back when Lamberti was.
Yeah, Lamberti is the administration. I met him only a couple times, but I had as a community leader, we would interact with his administration.
Very good.
And he was the one that he hired me and sent me through the academy.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So now that you've taken that next step and you become a law enforcement officer, what do you like? What do you like most about the job?
Me coming from a civil rights background is unique. For somebody from a civil rights background coming into law enforcement, right? Because you hear a certain segment of society, saying that police are always violating civil rights and so on and so forth. So you really don't understand. Everything when you're on the outside, when you're not doing the job, and you get in and you're suiting up and you're protecting people and you're putting your life on the line. So you really don't understand. So through the experience, and that made me, I believe, a better officer, respecting the Constitution, respecting people's rights, and I think that the most what I like to see, what makes me the happiest about actually my job in law enforcement, is, and I don't want to use the cliche helping people, but when you see people that are affected, the people that are victims of crimes, when you see families that are devastated because of some of the examples that I gave earlier,
right.
And you can be there and you can help them, and you can go after the bad guy, and you can take that bad guy off the street, and you can make society a little safer, and give that family some closure and some peace. Yeah. So I think that's what I really enjoy the most now about the job.
Yeah, I think I back when I first started, everything was about getting the bad guy.
Yeah.
Things have changed a lot in policing between all the different areas of actual law enforcement and stuff in community policing and all that other stuff. But back then it was when I hungered to catch the bad guy.
Yeah.
It was just, you just had the great feeling in the end that got him. Got another one off the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. And with that question, we're gonna have to go to the opposite
Sure.
end of the spectrum. So,
Sure.
what do you like, or what is the least thing that you like?
The politics, man. I never expected. I never expected. In this particular job, but that's I guess me being a little naive. The politics in the job are, a little disappointing. I always fathomed or thought that law enforcement had a higher standard, right, when it comes to internal dealing with each other, and but it's just like every other employer I've ever worked at. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and so I guess that's the most disappointing thing. Yeah.
Good. Okay, before we go on with more questioning, we've got a phone call. We have
Sure.
Ray on the line. We'll bring him on
Sure.
and see what he has to say or his questions. So, hello, Ray, you're on the air. Hello?
Is the phone mic on?
Phone mic. That's very good. That's a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't know what. Oh, here we go. I got it.
What kind of producer are you? Got it.
Yep. got
Co-host. Woohoo! Save the day.
it. Hey, I only created the show. Hello, Ray. You're on the air. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
How are you today, Ray?
Hey, good. Hey, I just wanted to compliment you guys. I lived overseas for a while, and American law enforcement is the best in the world. You go overseas, and everything is so corrupt, and it's just the best. When you get back from being overseas, it's such a blessing to be back here with people who don't take bribes and aren't dangerous.
And we appreciate that, Ray. It's a tough job, and we like I said earlier in the show that there's always a few bad apples. For the most part, the majority of us take pride in what we do every day.
Every day.
And still consider it an honor to be able to go out there and serve the community and protect each and every day we get out there. Yeah.
Ray, can I ask where in the world you had experience with other governments and law enforcement?
Well, I was in Africa,
Okay.
and I was part of a humanitarian unit, and we had to bribe everybody to get to where we were going.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, when you get back to the United States, when you talked about the flag, it just, I had to call you because that, it's just heartbreaking that we have leadership that doesn't understand how special it is to be an American. And when you go overseas and you see just corruption, at every level, and you have police officers just do their job and they get paid normal wages or lower wages than some jobs, and they don't take bribes or hassle people for money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yeah, well, we thank you. We thank you for the call, Ray. Keep listening. We hope you listen and call in for us again. Okay.
Thanks again, Ray.
So that's a good point. I mean, here's what you got to think about. The child who makes the flag and presents it has a certain pride, and with the developing mind of a child, he gets all that warm fuzzy feeling because everybody is so honored and so grateful to this child for going above and beyond, for showing his appreciation and respect to law enforcement.
Yeah.
And then somebody comes and says, well, yeah, we told you that, but it can't go anywhere because it's offensive.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You say that to a child? I mean, I just have a problem with that. I mean, I understand the whole, we've got to make sure that, we're not being offensive to anybody or anything. But when it comes to the flag, I mean,
One of those things.
Yep, just one of those things. So we talked about what you least like about the job. So you're also a field training deputy.
Correct. So I have, yeah.
So you're responsible for training new deputies.
I am.
And as they come out of the academy, right?
Yes. Right,
So-
right when they come out of the academy.
fresh, clean slate out of the academy.
Yeah, I remember that because.
So tell us a little bit about field training. Well, in all your experience with
Sure.
between community stuff and all that, your mind is just like filling with all this stuff that you're learning, and now just 7 years, right?
Yeah.
Into, well, how long have you been a field training deputy?
Field training, I think 2.5 years.
So
I think
2.5
just about
years.
2.5
So you're
years
figuring you are
Yeah.
fresh
Yeah.
from the academy, pretty much. I mean, you're we call you rookie.
Yeah.
4 years,
Yeah.
but now you're going to be a field training deputy. Now you have to teach brand new people coming out of the academy. So tell us a little about that, especially as a new deputy coming out of the.
Yeah, it's a very challenging position to be a field training officer or a field training deputy here at the sheriff's office. It's probably, and everyone I speak to, and I also tend to agree with, it's probably one of the most important positions that we have inside, or any law enforcement agency would be the officers or the deputies that you're putting brand new people with,
Right.
to mentor them, to train them, to give them instruction on how to read the law, how to apply the law, how to interact, how to look, just everything from A to Z. So it is a lot. I had a little bit more life experience when I came out of the academy, so it was a little more natural for me. But it is funny to get the newer, younger deputy, or the younger deputies. So there are a couple things that I've noticed, and my fellow field training officers have noticed as well. The deputies that we're getting, they're a good stock. They're good people. We're seeing them. We see them. We're talking to them, and they really have an internal mechanism to serve. So that's a good job on the SO's part. Of bringing us these new cadets, or not cadets, but new officers.
Right.
So when we get them, we just showing them the every day, and that the SO has a lot of policy. So we have to train them on all of our policy. We have to teach them, just everything that we talk about all the time: misdemeanor exceptions, felonies, officer tactics, safety.
It's a big responsibility.
It is. It is a very big responsibility.
Does it ever? I mean, do you ever it's a huge responsibility, and from what I remember, because I've been here a long time, pretty much you're held accountable for your officer that you released onto the road pretty much after his training, right? Like in the beginning, when they get off the road, they're off of FTO or FTD, whatever you want to call it. Something happens, people will revert back to you. I mean, because they're fresh out. Well, as a field training deputy, why didn't you, or how come you said to do that, or So that's a very big, big responsibility.
It is a big responsibility, and I can tell you, my unit, the unit that I work with in the field training in our area, we communicate quite a bit, and we compliment each other. We're like, hey, what's going on with this trainee? We need to work on A, we need to work on B, we need to work on Z. And we have a pretty good working unit, and we're turning out some good deputies. We have some good quality deputies that we're turning out. Some of them don't make it, as you know.
Right.
We've had some that they're not meant to be police officers.
Right.
They cause it's a safety issue for us, and we certainly don't want that. And we have some people that just don't get it.
Right.
And
then we have some like our like Mark on our shift is like phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's shaped, and he's molded into like the epitome of a law enforcement officer, of a
Correct.
deputy sheriff. He is awesome.
Yeah, total
Awesome as a
package.
new guy.
Mark
Yes.
is a total package.
Yes, he is.
He's doing good. He was, one of my trainees. He's
Yep.
as well as other training officers, but he's very professional,
Absolutely.
very driven, very dependable. Community loves him.
Yep.
It's total package. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. So why don't let's shift gears a little bit, and you're also a dive rescue.
Sure. Yep.
You're trained in dive rescue, homeless outreach, crisis intervention team. Just touch a little bit on that.
Sure.
And
Yeah, I'm on the dive rescue team. Shout out to all my rescue divers. The dive team where we it sounds fun, when you hear us a rescue diver, but we are all a very dedicated group. Diving, especially in the canals and the muck. Here in Broward County is not the most glamorous job, but it's something that we have to do. Also, we don't dive. We also dive in the ocean. Different things. There was some missing mini lobster season. Some divers, lost their life. The sheriff's office joined the Coast Guard, but so we do a lot of different things on the dive team. A lot of training, a lot of lives. So it's anything from body recovery, underwater investigations, car recovery, anything that we need an underwater unit, underwater presence.
And training, extensive training on that. You guys are
training.
like very.
We
They're
have
throwing you in the mud like every couple of weeks. Or
yeah.
something, right?
Well, you have to remember, we're underwater.
Right.
So our master, our chief diver is extremely talented, very passionate. Alex Beer, and it's a very dangerous job because
absolutely.
when you're underwater, if something happens, you're dead. You have no air, you have no way to breathe.
Right.
So we go through a tremendous amount of training to make sure we're safe, to make our fellow divers are safe. For us to accomplish our mission if we get sent on one.
Very good.
The homeless outreach and the crisis intervention, I believe quite a few deputies have gone through crisis intervention training.
Yeah, I've been through it.
Yeah, and that's taught us, it was a good tool for me as well in dealing with people in mental crisis, people that have mental illnesses or going through a mental crisis, to teach us how to better respond to them, to de-escalate, not to go hands-on so much if we don't need to.
Right.
And then the homeless outreach team is something that I volunteered for, and I'm still proud to be on it. And that's when we trying to help the people that are less fortunate,
right?
And get them assistance, get them services through the county. And I'm sure you remember there was maybe about a year ago, was a homeless lady named Claudia, and she was from the Bahamas. And not from the Bahamas, Jamaica.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you remember what I'm talking about?
Yep.
I'm sorry, the Bahamas hurricane just went in my head. She was from Jamaica.
Right.
And we had been dealing with her for over a year, and she just was sometimes uncooperative, but we still tried. Took her to the courthouse to get her help. I took her to the homeless shelter, just a lot of things. And finally one day I was able to connect with her and have a conversation with her, and it turns out she'd been trying to get home to her homeland Jamaica, and she hadn't been successful for years, right? So she had no documentation, she had no anything. So I went above and beyond. The next step, I called the consulate, the consulate down here. They got her a temporary travel visa. I bought her a plane ticket.
Right, I remember you did. That was just recently. That was not a few months ago.
I think at the beginning
right?
of the year.
It was the beginning of the year, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when you did that.
North Lauderdale, the city commission was real happy, and they gave me recognition. But anyway, so stuff like that on the homeless outreach team. Being homeless is not a crime.
Right.
However, homeless people still have to follow the law.
Right.
I just want to make sure that's clear.
Well, yeah, and it's the crisis intervention team getting CIT certified for me in the last few years. I mean, I'd never been CIT certified in the last few years, and it kind of it gave me a new, even after 22 years back then of law enforcement, it gave me a whole new perspective on that side of law enforcement. And I'll tell you, I mean, it's not that I never had empathy or compassion for, somebody who's down on their luck or whatever. because I've instilled it in my children. I mean, my son is the biggest. My son Brandon is the biggest. I mean, today I sent him some money for gas so he can come down and work the show, and he said, I'm stopping to get something to eat, and by the way, I'm buying a homeless guy some food. And I'm like, this child has a heart of like the biggest heart in the world, you know.
good.
And I've instilled that in my children purposely.
Yeah.
So and you know, as you know, I don't know if you know, he's pursuing a path of law enforcement.
Yeah,
As much
yeah.
as I've, you know, tried to tell him no, do this, that, and the other thing. Yeah. But he, you know, I'm sure eventually when he gets to that stage, he'll do really well in homeless outreach, and I think that's probably one of the things that he'll move towards, CIT and homeless outreach. So my
That's
daughter,
good.
on the other hand, she's doing fire, so but that's okay.
She's smarter than all of us.
She is. Yes, she is. So, but yeah. So thanks. So now we've gotten to know you.
Yeah.
And we know that the topic tonight is CVE,
Yep.
Countering Violent Extremism. Your experience also includes that tonight's topic.
Correct.
Specializing in countering violent extremism. It's a tongue twister.
Yeah. CVE, much easier to say.
Right, CVE. Well,
Yeah.
I want to make sure everybody understands first.
Got
It's
it. I
countering
understand.
violent extremism. Say that 100 times and no. So why don't you explain what exactly CVE is?
Sure. Countering Violent Extremism is an initiative. The official CVE project was launched by the Department of Homeland Security. Obviously, the previous tactics, if you will, by the government to deal with violent extremism was not successful because it was a very heavy-handed hammer approach to dealing with violent extremism, right? And we'll talk a little bit about all of that. But the Department of Homeland Security made a conscious decision and says, you know what, this problem is very big. We need to bring many different players into dealing with this particular issue. So we need to get everybody involved in countering violent extremism so we can have a safe homeland, to make sure our homeland is safe.
Right.
So that's what CVE is, the big picture, CVE. So now there's a couple different working, I guess, arms, if you will, of CVE. The most important thing regarding CVE is the understanding all of the different players in CVE, and then obviously I fit into that into a couple different ways, and I'll talk about that.
Yeah. Well, before we move into that,
Sure.
which we will. So being a community leader and everything, and then moving towards law enforcement and everything, what actually made you get into CVE?
I remember what happened on 9/11, where I was. I was a manager at Pep Boys, and I just, I was in awe. I saw what happened, and that memory always, stuck with me. And then just the weeks, months, years after, the aftermath of what happened to our country and our fellow first responders, and that stuck in my head. So when I started getting involved with law enforcement, I found myself in a very unique position, because not only was I law enforcement, doing my law enforcement role,
Right.
I also was a community leader, if not
Right.
one of the most prominent ones in the Muslim community here in South Florida.
Right.
So that was a very unique combination, and the Department of Homeland Security almost immediately recognized that unique combination. Because typically you don't have that. If you have somebody that's a community leader, typically for a minority community leader, they are somewhat resistant to law enforcement, right? And we can talk about that. There's good reason. It's not it's not unwarranted.
Right.
Or if you're law enforcement, you're not you're not so much community driven.
Right.
Right. So there's two different hats. So I came to the table for the CVE table with a very different perspective and a very different set of skills and talents that I brought to that. So that's how I first got involved. Department of Homeland Security reached out to me. We had many brainstorming meetings, many conferences that I attended, suggested things to them, and then eventually I just started traveling. There are different parts of the U.S., also internationally, I've been to Marseille, France, to Trinidad and Tobago a couple times. to
Yeah,
Saudi
which we're
Arabia.
gonna
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Well, and just
Yeah.
in a second, but
Sure.
you say that CVE is a global initiative.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does that mean?
As I stated, the understanding. Well, let's talk about what CVE addresses first,
Okay.
right? So we can be on the same page. So basically, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It addresses extremism.
Your passion is showing.
Yeah, it addresses violent extremism, right?
Okay.
So violent extremism. So here, let's put it in the context of the USA, right? Because that's our homeland, and that's we should be talking about
Right.
that. So here, there's different types of extremism here. So let's talk about that. So your viewers, so we can open with that line of discussion to give them a little bit more education and knowledge. Unfortunately, I was talking to you prior. Most law enforcement, local law enforcement, when you say CVE or countering violent extremism, they have no idea what you're talking about.
And I told you that.
Yeah.
Until I researched this topic,
Yeah.
I didn't know what CVE was.
Correct.
And I was up till 2:30 in the morning doing a lot of show prep for this, and as I told you when we were talking earlier, preparing for the show, I don't think tonight's show would even scratch the surface of what this is all about. I mean, it's unbelievable. I was like, I gotta finally go to bed, So I think
There's a lot. Yeah.
I think I got enough.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's we'll talk more about it, but let me stick with okay. So the types of extremism, right?
Right.
Let's talk about that briefly. We'll just scratch the surface.
Yeah, because later we'll go to a break in a little bit, and then
Okay.
we'll come back and we'll actually start getting into the
Got it.
actual one. But we
Got
can
it, yeah.
touch base on them real quick.
Yeah, I'll do it quickly. It is important for you, the viewers, to understand.
Yep,
because
absolutely, I agree.
Unfortunately, and this is a stereotype I fight all the time. Most of the time, when you hear about extremism or radicalism, the focus narrows down to the Muslim or Islam, right?
Yes.
And certainly the Muslim faith have people that have done acts of terrorism. I just mentioned 9/11. However, and there's some backfiring about only focusing on that. We'll talk
Right.
about that a little
Right.
bit more. So basically, here in the U.S., we have different types of extremism. We have right-wing extremism. Right-wing extremism is synonymous with something that we all recognize now as a white supremacy. My race is superior,
Right.
or my ethnicity is superior. This type of extremism, and it's okay for people to have those views if that's what they want to believe in.
Right.
But the second you start turning criminal, which means you start breaking the law or plan to break the law, then that becomes a violent extremism issue. And then law enforcement would need to get involved with that.
Right.
Left-wing extremism is on the other side, right? So you have right-wing extremism is going to be race-driven. I'm superior. Left-wing extremism is more of a anti-government, more of a socialist type extremism,
Okay.
right? And it's okay if you have, I think the government should pay for everything for everybody. That's okay. But we're talking about when people take it to the extreme and become violent. That's an issue for us here to keep us
Right.
safe. The political or the religious type extremism, as I mentioned, examples, and a lot of people don't realize this because unfortunately, even in the media, they reduce or they narrow it to Muslim.
Right. Which I did definitely in researching found, and I'll talk more about it in a little bit.
Yeah.
Where I couldn't believe how naive a lot as Americans we are. I mean, because we'll talk more about it.
We'll talk more. I'll just finish. So it's very simple: political to change the political or a religious motive, right?
Right.
And obviously the big three here is from like the Abrahamic faith, right? So like we have the KKK. That's
Right.
a terrorist organization
Yep.
here, a domestic terrorist organization.
Right.
ISIS, right? That would be for the Muslim faith, or is
Right.
the people that are claiming to follow Islam, right?
Right.
And ISIS have done recruiting here in the U.S. and worldwide, and then in Kak, like Kahana High, that would be a Judaism, a Jewish-based terrorist organization that has done operation here, in the U.S. So that's a different.
And
type
I was reading also something about a Colombian-based, I forgot which one it was, but revolutionary FARC or
Yeah.
revolutionary. So
Yeah.
I was reading, like I said, I read a.
Yeah. And then single issue, the last one would be like single issue extremism. And this one poses a very unique threat to law enforcement because this particular group target law enforcement. So you're like, sovereign citizens. You got the free men on the land. This group actually targeted a police station, the Pentagon. You know what I mean? Yep. So there are. I just wanted to touch that briefly because there are so many different types of violent extremism.
Yes.
And that's hopefully what we want to educate your viewers on today, and also our brothers and sisters in uniform, because there's a lot more that we can be doing.
Right. There's a lot more that we have to do.
Correct. Yeah. Because
not that we can be doing. There's a lot more. Like I said, a lot of. I stayed up late last night, and I was just like, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
So those are the different types of extremism. So let's talk about CVE.
Okay.
Right. Let's talk about the global. I know it's a lot, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep it interesting.
Okay.
But so here's all the stakeholders in CVE, right? So who does CVE affect? It affects everybody on this planet, right? Because people that want to cause harm and kill us want to kill everybody.
Right.
So the stakeholders are going to be the non-government organizations, a lot of nonprofits. You're going to have private sector, like you can. Really anyone in the private sector, technology companies, for-profit companies, anyone. Mental health providers, academia are very important in this because they're the ones that study and produce the strategy, or at least the data for the people that make the strategy, so they can talk real numbers, right? Say, okay, which group is giving us the most trouble, right? Well, this group they've done this many attacks and this many times, and so then they have that data. The academic turns that over to the government agencies, right. and so they do that, right? Social service organizations that provide, food assistance. They provide children assistance or housing assistance, anything, right? Social service organizations. Educators have a couple different hats in the countering violent extremism. You have a practitioner, which would go out and teach the community about CVE. And you have the educators that teach the college courses about extremism, so on and so forth. Obviously, the communities are a big part, the stakeholders, the lay community. And law enforcement would be the last leg of all of the people that are stakeholders in countering violent extremism. Right. Yeah. So that's CVE, right? It's a big effort. It's a global effort, meaning that every government participates in a global counter-violent extremism task force.
Right.
Okay, because it goes across. It doesn't recognize any lines, any countries. People that want to commit violence do it to everybody.
Right. Which what we're going to do. This would have led to my next question. It would have been a perfect segue into my next topic, which would have been your travel and teaching other governments and agencies. So what we'll do is we'll hold off on that.
Okay.
And come back with that so we can take a quick break. So let's do that first, and then we'll come back and we'll do that. So as a reminder, Copservations is broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Copservation Facebook page, the Copservation YouTube channel, and now the Copservations Twitter page. How do you like that? We're moving up.
Millennials.
That page is at Copservations_. At Copservations_. Follow us on Twitter if you would. We'd really love for you to follow us. So we're going to take a little break, but don't forget, if you have a question, comment, or a story you'd like to share, we'd really like for you to join the conversation. It's a very good topic. I know a lot of people are wondering out there or have questions that they really would like to call, and they're worried about it, but don't. We, like Rob said last week, we don't bite. So give the podcast studio a call toll free, 888-511-COPS, 888-511-2677. And don't forget, you can also instant message your questions and comments on our Facebook page. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
how to start that conversation with your friend about their mental health. First, make sure you aren't too far away. Closer, closer. Whoa, 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 too close. Now ask something open-ended like, you all good?
Are you all good?
Or is everything okay?
Is everything okay?
Well done, awkward teenage actor.
Actually, no. Thanks for asking.
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
Awkward.
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back. When you want to talk, I'm here.
Awkward.
Are your children in the right car seat for their age and size? Is the seat supposed to be forward-facing or rear-facing? Did they move to a booster seat too soon? It may be too late to check when you're on the road. Fortunately, you're on the couch. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Don't think you know. Know you know.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677.
Hey, and, oh, we got a commercial.
I surrender.
Okay. You had one job, Danny. One job.
Give him a break. He's co-hosting and he's commercialing.
Some co-host. I haven't heard it but 3 words from him since the show started. Anyway, so welcome back to Observations. Tonight's guest is Nezar Hamze, or as I like to call him, the Hammer. And our discussion is countering violent extremism. So let's get back real quick to what I was going to discuss or ask you, because you were talking about other governments and other police law enforcement agencies. So your experience includes traveling the world for Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
You travel the world. You travel the world, or you don't. For me, the furthest I've been is I think Las Vegas for the NAB show for Ryan last year. But you go and you train other law enforcement officers, law enforcement agencies, and governments on how to work together to battle CVE.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us just a little bit, so we can get on into the project, about some of the places you've been, your experiences, and how well it's received, or you've been received.
So my task when I go there, because I have a very unique set of qualifications, if you will, because I'm a Muslim community leader and also in law enforcement. It gives me a very neutral approach, to dealing with countering violent extremism. And there is a lot of opposition from the Muslim community. It's interesting because when you look at the other communities that are having troubles, they're similarly reacting to the way that the mainstream, when I'm saying the mainstream, the majority of the Muslim community, right? So there's been an issue for the Muslim community regarding CVE was Well, all of this work, all of the CVE, right? When I just went over everything, right? When I went over how many different groups there are, how many people different affect, the different reasons for CVE, Muslim and Islam was, violent Muslims were in part of that. But when you look at the budgeting and when you look at the focus of the government, right? When we're talking about the law enforcement aspect and,
Right.
and the legislators, the majority of everything goes and focuses on the Muslim community, right?
Which is what I discussed with you earlier, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about in a second.
So the reason I'm talking about that is there was quite a bit of an uproar in the Muslim nationwide against me because they said, Nezar, we know you're a good guy, you have ethics, and you're an upright person, you don't play games, but you have to recognize that the efforts of this CVE effort is only focusing on Muslims, right? Which creates a more unsafe environment or society for everybody, right? So my response to them was, well, let me ask you something. If somebody from within the Muslim community is doing something, don't you think it would be appropriate law enforcement be informed and, if that person can be rehabilitated or intervene, we can do that. But if not, if he crosses that threshold of breaking the law, right, he should be reported to law enforcement,
Absolutely.
right? And they say, absolutely. I'm like, okay, so what's the problem? So the problem is the government's only looking at Muslims, right, for CVE. I said, okay, let me ask you a different question. How many people are attacking the Muslim community, right? How many hate crimes are happening against Muslims? How many things are happening against the Muslim community? That's also countering violent extremism, correct? So when I tell all the community leaders that, they just go blank, because how can they come back at me and say, well, no, that's not an issue. Of course it's an issue.
Right.
Anyone being attacked, and this could take the Muslim community, right? There's a small issue within the Muslim community, the people that turn to violence to deal with their grievances, right? There's a small group, just like in every other group. So that was my approach. So anyway, Department of Homeland Security heard my message, and they said, you're absolutely right, right? So teach us how you do this. Teach us, what are the function? How does it function? What are the operations of it, right? And that's my background as an operation, so I could put that together for them. So that grew, and they said, you know what? We're having an issue with ISIS recruitment in Marseille, in France. Can you go and work with the U.S. Embassy, with the French prefect, which is their national security and everything,
Right.
and with their local law enforcement, and train them how to deal with this, because they have a lot of people leaving Marseille, France, to go join ISIS, right? So I went, and I went there and had an opportunity to get basically what you would say like briefings, security briefings from just everyone that was involved. And they were very appreciative of the U.S. government. And I took a lot of pride in that, because here I'm a member of the U.S., a U.S. citizen coming to help a different country. So I took a lot of pride in that.
Right.
So anyway, security briefing, I said, okay, thanks, stop talking. I want to go into the community. That's what I want to do, because I'm a practitioner. I'm on the ground. I like to hear things.
Hands-on,
Yeah.
yep,
Let
absolutely.
me get in there. So I get in there and I see something was a little alarming, right? So I'm more center in my views, just about everything. But then I start going in, but then I started seeing like what the real problem was. And the real problem was that they were treated institutionally as an other.
They as in
the Muslim community
Okay.
there. Yeah, there was in Marseille is a very poor area. A lot of Algerians. A little history there. We don't need to get into that, but it's a very poor area.
Okay.
In Marseille, and the police were literally scared to go into certain areas. Like I went to the police station, met with the command, and did everything. And I'll talk about their technology in a little bit. But they said, well, we don't go to this area. We don't go to this area. And I said, why? And they said, well, this the danger. We've had an officer shot here. We don't have the resources, to do that. So I said, okay, do you have any Muslim officers? First thing I said, hey, do you have any Muslim officers? And they said, yeah, we do. And I said, okay, where are they? I want to meet them. So they brought their Muslim officers to me, and I was talking to them through a translator because they didn't speak any English except America. We love America. So that was funny. So anyway, so I went and I said, okay. I explained. I said, do you know this to be a problem, right? And they knew this was a problem. So I told the command. I said, okay, let's do this. Let me go get the community leaders, right? The religious leaders and everyone. And I said, I want them to meet with these Muslim officers. And I met with them, and they said, oh yeah, we know them because they're from our community, right? And I said, okay, command, talking to the law enforcement command, I said, put these officers in that community. Let them, no. They said, no, we can't do that. Well, why? No, we couldn't do that. I said, okay, listen, you called me here to help you, right? This is a very practical, hands-on solution that you guys can put officers that the community trusts, and they trusted them. Put them in the community. Let them deal with the issue.
Right.
So that was one aspect. Another thing that I learned very quickly, that the people that were leaving to go join ISIS, they had very, very little education. 'Cause I saw their profiles. I saw very little education about the religion of Islam. They were nearly ignorant. And when they have a different criminal justice system than we do here. It's very interesting the way France does it. They have a very low prison population. They have a integrated rehabilitation mechanism in their incarceration system, right? So they get somebody, they put him in jail, and as they go, they start rehabilitating them, get them ready for work, and they're in and out of jail a lot faster, right? So there's a little different, and that's including people that went to go join for ISIS. But the files and everything that I was reading, they had a basic lack of resources and a disdain and a disconnect from the government. So that was the reason, in Marseille, in Marseille, so, France, and that was an interesting trip. So that was my first trip. Then I got called to go to Trinidad and Tobago, which is, it's an island, Caribbean, beautiful island.
Right.
Now, Trinidad and Tobago was interesting. They are the highest per capita in the world, the number of people leaving to go join ISIS.
Really?
In the world. And that's why I got called specifically.
And is that the same reason, because their education and their...
Different reason there.
Okay.
Similar, but different. There, when, same thing, met with all the people, the national security people, blah, 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 get, this interesting data. It was great. But then I went to a borough. They're called boroughs. They're not called cities. They're called boroughs. So I went to the Chaguanas, right? And I spent some time with their command, but I also spent some time with their SWAT team, right? Which they're not called a SWAT team there, but that would be the equivalent, right? The people that are heavily armed, they're doing that. And they speak English. So I was able to talk to them. They talked to me, and they had a group there called Unruly ISIS. That's what the name of the gang was, Unruly ISIS, right? So there it was money. It was money. That the indicator was that what was driving per capita to be the largest country in the world exporting fighters to ISIS. Money. ISIS was recruiting them with money.
Wow.
They were saying, listen, if you come, we're going to give you this many thousands a month. Obviously, that was a lie. That never happened.
Right.
But we're coming, and I had an opportunity to sit with a morning talk show host. He's a real funny guy. And his cousin was recruited by ISIS. And this guy, and I talked to him, and I said, well, what was your cousin's education, on Islam? He says, very little. It was, that, and it was about money, because
still about the money.
It was about money. It was about poverty, right? It was about them not having resources, the government not giving them resources.
Right.
It's not like here. There, it's not like that.
So you would say that the governments in themselves were receptive to your coming and helping them and trying to bridge that gap between law enforcement and the community and stuff, and working, battling CVE with community community law enforcement, like like building a bridge between the community leaders.
Yeah,
and
that's
stuff.
one part of it. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
So you were received okay.
Very.
And
I even invited back, and I went back several times.
by the governments, the law enforcement equally as well as receptive. It's
Absolutely.
It's just not meshing, or what is the? I mean, what is the?
I think there's a couple of. I mean, there's been improvements, right?
But there's still a disconnect.
There's still a little disconnect, but I wouldn't say any more than where some of our society, even here in the U.S., is disconnected from the government, right? But that was a very specific issue that I was dealing with. You know, it wasn't. Such large issues that we, dealing with here is a very specific issue about ISIS recruitment. Okay. So not only did I meet with law enforcement when I was in those countries, I also met with the Muslim community leaders. Right. And told them, okay, tell me what's going on. This is the issue. So it's a very unique set, right, of how I got involved with CVE. And it's been very effective. So I've been blessed, and I'm happy and I'm proud to serve this country doing that.
And so, which would, when you talk about the different types of violent extremism, which we touched just a little bit on before we went to break, to get to move forward in that, as I have just recently learned, there are so many types of violent extremism. Yeah. And I know tonight's topic is focusing basically on law enforcement's counter.
Sure.
Because we're law enforcement officers and we're trying to counter the types that come after us, basically. Yeah. The ones that have no doubt in their mind that they will kill us or come hurt us or whatever they have to do.
In some cases, even target us.
And target us, right. But in researching the topic, and I discussed this with you before, and I slightly mentioned it before we went to break, that there are many misconceptions between certain groups and communities, and a lot of Americans. There are a lot. Like I said, you can go online and read and research, and there's all kinds of special, studies and all this other stuff that are found right there online. I mean, some of them are pages and pages, and you got to read through them. But when you read through them, pretty much the message that you get out of there, or one of the messages you get out of there, is they really have no idea how many other different types they are. Yeah. They, like you said about the Muslim community, they're this much in this, but when they're looked at, they're actually this much, in the eyes of who's looking at them. Yeah. So they have no idea other than tying to violent extremism to either a militia or a certain religious group.
Correct.
Period.
Yeah.
And there are so many groups, like you said, it's crazy. Yeah. And I thought, I would go to one page and I would see, well, there's this group, and like I was talking about the Columbia group and all that other stuff. And then I thought, okay, that's fine and dandy, but let me just double check and Google a little bit more. And then there's also this group, and I'm like, it's crazy. Yeah. It's so big. And yet we focus on very
a narrow
specific,
focus.
Right?
Yeah.
Specific militia. Sure. These crazy guys that live in the woods that target the government and religion. Muslims, they want nothing to do but hurt. It's there. Yeah. It's in black and white. And like I said, until I did the show prep last night, I wouldn't have known. It's very important.
Well,
it's very important what you do.
I'd love to hear from your viewers. You know what I mean? To see what questions they have, because I think that's part of the show and to educate people. So I'd love to hear from them if they have any questions regarding it. I can tell you though, we don't need to look very far. Let's just look here in Florida, right? We see how many mass shootings there have been recently. Right. We see, from every religion, right? We have, from the Pulse, that was a Muslim man that did that in the Pulse shooting. Then we have here Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, so that, that had nothing to do with religion, but that was a violent extremist act, right? It's a violent extremism. Right. The shooting in the airport. I mean, and that's happening all over the country, And if you even go global, right? Look at what happened in New Zealand at Christchurch. Yeah. That guy was a white supremacist. He walked in and mowed all of those Muslims down like he was playing a video game, right?
Yeah.
So that, that was heartbreaking for me to watch. And if you've ever had the opportunity to watch that footage, I'm sure it breaks everyone's heart. Actually, we went through training, I believe, at the
it was pretty rough to watch in training.
I mean, you have these people that are just praying, and this guy goes in there full swatted out, not swat, but tacked out, and just mows him down. So it's something that that every member of our country needs to be concerned with. But now to wrap it right into our conversation about law enforcement, because we focus on law enforcement here, it's extremely important for us to know, first of all, what the issues are. Typically, it's reserved for like SID, right? For specialty units,
right?
Like a JTTF or Strategic Investigations Unit or the FBI or Feds. But let me tell you something. We are on the ground.
Right.
We are in the cities. We are the ones in our patrol cars with our rifles and our shotguns.
Right.
With our, and we are the ones that are responding to these incidents.
Right.
And it's our responsibility as law enforcement officers to have that knowledge. Right. And that's hopefully what we can accomplish a little tonight, is give people a little more knowledge.
Yep. Definitely. Before I go on, I got this. Who is one of a viewer is asking who do you think the biggest threat in the U.S. is?
I think that I'm not going to narrow it down to one group because that wouldn't be appropriate. I think that violent extremism has no unique face. It could be a Christian, it could be a Muslim, it could be a Jew, it could be a white supremacist, it could be a leftist, it could be a rightist.
And the animal
rights
person,
groups,
I was surprised that anti-rights groups
these
were in
people
there.
are violent.
Abortion, that's all included. In those different types of violence, and I would never have associated that.
Yeah.
When you hear that, the violent extremism, I mean, until you educate yourself, your mind is driven to this.
Correct. Yeah.
And so you're right. It's up to us as law enforcement officers to gain the knowledge and use it as a tool.
Correct.
When we hit the streets and serve the public, so we can better serve the public. So
Well, I mean, to answer your like I said, I'll just wrap up in regarding this question. Any type of violent extremism, any type of organized violent extremism where innocent people are being targeted, that's our biggest issue right now. If the viewer is asking where should we put more resources, well, I think that we have the data to do that. We have the FBI's analysis, we have university analysis about who's creating more deaths, more attacks, right? We have that data, right? But I think it's important for everyone to stay in their lane. So that data is important for law enforcement, right? Because we're the ones that are investigating and doing and making sure everybody's safe. And I think it's also good for the legislators to have that data,
right?
To so they can make laws and they can point people. Yeah. But if we say to the lay member saying, okay, white supremacy is the biggest threat here in the United States, then all the other groups in the eyes of everyone else or the layperson are going to be ignored. So it's not appropriate, and I don't think we should do that. So we should address it globally. We should address it.
Right. So pretty much we've basically answered what my next question was going to be, was how you got the position with the Department of Homeland Security, and your actual title or position with them is a subject matter expert.
So I'm not okay. So let me. So there's no questions. I'm not an employee of DHS.
Right. No. I'm not saying if that's the way.
Yeah, it's a SME, a subject matter expert regarding community relations with that specific specialty, Muslim relations, with law enforcement and the government, right? So that was my, that's how I got involved.
Okay, so that's that. Like I said, that answered that next question that I would have. So. So as a subject matter expert in CVE, what I think you might have mentioned this, but maybe I missed it. But what do you think your biggest obstacle, you as a subject matter expert, is in creating this bridge and bringing community policing with the community and the law enforcement together to counter violent extremism. What do you think is your biggest obstacle?
Trust. Trust is and I know that's going to hit home a lot with everyone involved. So let me talk about trust for a little bit.
Sure.
So, you've known me for a while, Tony. You know, a lot of people don't trust me, right? Except for the people that know me,
right,
and that have worked with me, and know what I'm about, and know my ethics, and know what I stand for. So law enforcement, if you use that example, and I'm a member of the law enforcement community, right? So that's an obstacle. Is even internally we have trust issues, and I don't want to get into specifics, but
not asking you to.
We have trust issues internally because this person says this about this person, not based in fact, not based in anything except this person said this and he knows this and tied to this and
the old telephone game.
The old bullshit, right? So there's a trust issue. Now also law enforcement regarding trust, forget about internally, forget about let's talk about law enforcement relationship with the community when you're talking about countering violent extremism. Talk about, because it's the word trust I'm talking about.
Right.
So if you were, let's say, Tony, you're a member of the Muslim community, and the government came to you and said, hey, we want to do countering violent extremism, same pitch, everything that I just said about how broad it is and everything, but then you find out that 90% of the budget spent on it is just focusing on you and your faith. Are you going to have a trust issue there? That's a trust issue.
Right.
And that's some of the issue that CVE has, right? Is trust between the community and trust between law enforcement and the government, right? Because now it's a different situation. Now, how am I able to navigate that inside the Muslim community, right? Because hold on. Nezar is he's a snitch, or he's an informant, right? So you get that stuff a lot. So I'm no snitch.
And does it work the same way on the opposite when you go into the community? Oh, he's a law enforcement, we don't trust him. Does it work that?
You get it sometimes, but I've been in this community for my whole life. I've been in the community leadership role for over a decade, and one thing about me is I don't play games. If somebody is breaking the law, I'm going to let them know very quickly that they're breaking the law. And the people that need to know about that person are going to know about them almost immediately, right? I set that expectation. I talk to everyone, about that. That's my line. People say, what's your line? If you get information, right, we're talking about trust now. And I always tell, if I find out that somebody is, or will break the law, I'm done with that person. Is, or will, right? Past, present, future. That person will be reported to the appropriate agencies, whoever it is, whatever jurisdiction, whatever it is, and the CVE goal is just that. The CVE goal is, okay, so we have a relationship with the community, and we want to help people when intervention is appropriate, but we also want to make sure that law enforcement has the ability to do their job with the intel, right? So that's based. So trust is going to be the biggest issue, and all of us can help that. All of us can help overcome that trust issue.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
What about I've noticed an issue with mental illness.
Yeah.
And CVE. Do you find this a growing concern, the mental issue aspect of it?
Yeah, I think I do quite a bit of CVE work and dealing with different JTTFs, different federal agencies, and everything, and anyone that's in the business of investigating, special investigations or terrorism investigations.
Right.
They're all going to tell you that we are seeing a huge rise in mental illness. A lot of the cases they get are involving people that have mental illness,
right?
And that's also part of the the stakeholders, if you remember, about the mental health providers. Remember I mentioned that in the beginning?
Yes, I did.
So that's also another part of this problem. So let's say I'm going to just be vague, but there's, so many cases that we've had. We've had somebody, walk into a church and say, I'm going to blow this place up, right? And it happens to be a member of the Muslim community. So obviously I get the call very quickly, and we get the appropriate personnel to go secure this person and interview this person. And it's quickly determined, very quickly, this person has a mental illness. He has no capability of doing this. He has, no finances to do this.
Right.
He can't. He just has a mental illness. So what does law enforcement do with that person? What can law enforcement do with that person? We can Baker Act. We can get them. We can get them.
But then the Baker Act, as you and I both know, it's a revolving door with that. A lot of the times, it's a 3-day.
Yeah.
And then it's a doctor saying, okay, here's the medication you need to take, and then it's out on the streets, and there's no continued care.
Correct.
For those people. Whereas years ago, when I first became a deputy, we had South Florida State Hospital, and we had places that would actually. We can actually bring them to, and they can get treatment.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's just like I said, a revolving door. It's you have a problem, and a lot of them recognize they have problems, and they'll say, "I have a problem. I really need help." Okay, well, I want to get you that help as law enforcement, and we really do want to get them the help.
We do,
and we bring them to that. It's basically a dead end. I consider it, because we bring it to them. They're treated for the 3 days. Sometimes they're released the same day, which I find. But like I said, it's all about medicating. Here's your prescription.
Yeah.
Go away.
So let me put this in the context of CVE, right?
Okay.
So now, what is the CVE model supposed to do? So, and this has happened. It's happened several times here in South Florida with different agencies. So we get this call. This guy says, it goes into a church. We do this. We secure him. The guy. Nezar, this guy is just mental.
Right.
He needs help beyond what our government system can do. So where do we turn? We turn to our non-government agencies, our nonprofits. So that's the partnership to our community-based organizations.
Right.
So now in this particular situation, we get this individual sit down, continued counseling. We get him, because he had a resource issue as well. He had no job. He had no place to live. So we were able to, through the network that we've created, we get this guy some housing. We get him continuous counseling.
Right.
And to try to help him, And there's a lot of wins and there's a lot of losses.
Yeah.
But the CVE goal is to have the network. So let's say, for instance, you're an agent, Tony, and you're investigating, and you're like, man, this guy... I don't want to arrest this guy. He's just he has mental issues. He's schizophrenic. He's been off his meds, or he has PTSD. Right. We want to get this guy help, but we are restricted as employees of the government. We can only go so far, like you said. So that's the purpose of CVE. Yeah.
So they're actually somehow the government and the community in that aspect of treatment, something's got to be done, because a lot of the time, a lot of these people, and by being on the homeless outreach and CIT, a lot of these people are perfectly happy where they are when they're homeless or they have issues, and they would rather be on the streets, not be bothered, not go, because they feel more protected, not confined to these shelters or whatever help that we can give to them as a government agency.
Yeah.
But we need an extra step where it doesn't end at dropping them off at the hospital and the doctor says, here you go, and then next week, 2 days later they're calling again. Oh, he's on the bus bench again. People can't get on the bus. There's got to be another step, because mental health is a huge, not only in the CVE, mental health, and is a huge problem in this country, and there's got to be an uprising.
Well, something that's interesting fact. I don't know if you remember this fact when we went through CIT training. Florida is one of the worst underfunded states
Yes.
in the country when it comes to mental health
Yeah.
funding, right? So maybe AOC could do that.
I don't know.
Maybe we could get some funding for mental health.
Yeah. If she could do that, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would be awesome because,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, and it seems like we have like the most here. I mean, you know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, not literally, and I'm not being offensive to anybody or anything, but it literally, it is absolutely crazy that we cannot reel in this issue, the mental health issue.
Yeah.
Especially in the state. First of all, we're a retirement. Not only, you know, we're dealing with mental issue. You know, the people that we deal with on a daily basis. But then you're dealing with, you know, Alzheimer's. You're dealing with dementia and stuff like that. People who are already having, you know, mental issues medically for you know what I mean, for in old age because it's a retirement state.
Yeah.
You know, so compound the issue that we have with the retirement state and the issues that in the medical issues we deal with as we get older in life.
Yeah.
And nobody can, you know, say, listen, it's time to deal with this head on. I mean, it's crazy. It's just, I don't know. We can talk about this forever because it's like a big circle.
It is.
A lot of it reverts back to the mental health issues and stuff like that. So, but moving on, another question that I had for you was instances, in specific instances, because we're obviously reaping the benefits of CVE in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Specific incidents, cases that were filed by law enforcement. Are you familiar with any? Like, is it happening?
Of course.
Is it like huge? Is it getting there? You know, what's the?
Yeah. So remember, I just want to be clear. I speak in my capacity.
Right.
I cannot speak for all of the different stakeholders. So I can speak in my capacity as a Muslim community leader.
Right.
And the relationships I've built with various agencies across
right.
the country.
Right.
Part of I said is that this trust word, right? It's trust. How do I trust somebody to call them, to give them information that's not going to come back on me? We get this all the time when we're doing regular investigations on the road. We get some, you know, a theft, a robbery, a rape or something. I'm not saying nothing,
Right.
you know, right? So how do we get information? And I'm talking in my capacity as a Muslim community leader, right? Is if somebody says something that, like I said, has, will, or is or will commit a crime, how can I open that line of communication, right, with somebody that I trust? So how did I accomplish that? So I went through the entire state of Florida with over 100 different mosques and also different states in the southeast region of the U.S. and educated them. You remember part of the stakeholder I said educators when I went in the beginning?
Right.
So I educated them on what violent extremism is. I educated them on what their rights are. That's very important for the community to know what their rights
Right.
are. I'm not talking about your rights on dealing with law enforcement. That's
Right.
not what
Right to
you know.
remain silent. Everything you say,
we read them their rights all the time. I'm talking about from a community dealing with countering violent extremism perspective. So I would teach them, and you probably saw, and a lot of your viewers probably saw me blasted all over the news with blue guns, and Hamze's teaching people in mosque how to use guns. It's such. Remember what people say, and blah blah blah, right? So what I was doing was teaching them first how to protect themselves. Run, hide, fight, right? The active shooter, because of all the mass shootings. Right. So I'm giving them information on how to protect themselves.
Right, which is what we give them
which anybody
as
does.
Law enforcement.
Right.
Run, hide, fight.
Correct. What anybody does, right? But because I'm Muslim and because I'm in a mosque, it's now so controversial that this guy, right? So this is one of the gazillion propaganda things. But anyway, so the trust. So I teach the community, and I also inform the community, listen, if you see or hear anything of anybody talking about violence that they have, planning, or that they are doing it, or they will do it, I want you to call me directly. You will remain anonymous. I will not tell anybody, but you have a responsibility just like I have a responsibility, because this is our country. We go to work here. We raise our kids here. And I need to hear from you directly. and it works.
Very good.
Over a dozen times it has worked over the last 5 years or 4 years that I started the program, right? Many of them you probably have seen arrest, from it even recently.
Okay.
Also, a lot of intervention cases where, remember the example I gave about the guy going to the church? That happened.
Yeah.
That happened, right? And we were able to divert that guy and get him resources for the people that want to get the help.
Right.
So the model works, but it has to be built on trust, right? Now, what does trust mean? It has to be transparent. You have to be transparent. You can't have a hidden agenda, right? I want you to be right. Listen, there's a part of law enforcement that I know that need to operate in the shadow. I'm not talking about that. They have to do what they do. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. They continue doing what they're doing. I'm talking about the CVE effort, which is a community-based, transparent effort, right? And it works. It really does work. And hopefully we can educate some law enforcement officers and community members to do the same thing.
Yeah, hopefully we got through to some people tonight too, and have their gears spinning and have them looking into more stuff. And I wish they would call and ask some. I know there's people with burning questions or that
I wish they would call. I don't bite.
They can call. I mean, we're an honest show. We don't run from controversy in this podcast. And one of the biggest things, and we've told people, we won't run from controversy. We don't get political. We don't get religious. We don't run from, but we don't run from controversy. We'll cover the topics that law enforcement officers need to cover, and give them the tools that they need to do that. I mean. And as far as I'm concerned, this topic I thought was very important, and other law enforcement officers need to educate themselves on it.
Yes.
Because it's another tool in your toolbox.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not going to be, a couple more years, I'm done. I mean, I'm in the drop. I'm done. Yeah. So I have this tool for the next few years, but I'm gone after that. But the next guy, like Mark, 30 years. God bless him. Yeah. Mark, 30 years, he's got to go. And this will be a tool that he can use for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
He didn't learn it late in his career like I did.
Yeah.
With only 3 years, 10 months to go.
Sure.
So I think it's very important. And it's not going to... it's not going to... change the opinions and views of everybody, but I think it will make people a little less naive and a little more understanding as to what really is going on here. Not that there's an underlying, agenda, So I mean, you and I worked together. I think when I first met you, I never knew you. I mean, I've heard the stories. And I came to you and I spoke with you, and you and I had a one-on-one, and I told you exactly, my feelings and everything, and never had an issue or anything since then. I count on you just as much as I count on the next guy to be there when I'm, needing it.
Of course.
And I have no doubt in my mind that I won't get that from you.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt in my mind.
Second. Yeah.
Anyway, so. Your position or your participation in CVE, your position in CVE. Oh.
Tony, I think we need to take a break.
Yeah, let's take a break because there's a little. You'll see, it's going to be funny.
All right.
Let's go ahead and take a break. We don't have much longer, but we'd like to hear from you. Give us a call. We'll answer what questions you have or doubts you have and stuff like that. Just give us a call at 1-888-511-COPS, 1-888-511-2677. We'll be right back.
If you have a question, comment, or a story you'd like to share, join the conversation by giving the podcast studio a call toll-free at 888-511-COPS. You can also instant message your questions and comments live during the broadcast on our Facebook page.
Put the keys down, Kevin.
But
I'm gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
My text to emoji ratio has gotten a little out of hand.
A little?
Yep, I'm definitely gonna call a ride home.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzz and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So, yeah, I know. That's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. Now back to our host.
It's a lot of fun. This
It is, and now everybody knows because we're on the air.
I know. I'm not worried about it. So, so we have a lot of fun here. I really love doing this. So, anyway, back to, I think what the question was going to be about the participation in CVE with the Sheriff's Office.
Yeah.
And its effects, positives, negatives. I mean, what
Yeah.
Does the Sheriff's Office have a problem with it, or are they pretty workable with you and stuff like that?
Well, remember what you asked me about what's the most or the least favorite thing? So my least favorite thing is the politics. So it's an interesting thing that I've had to navigate, and one thing that I don't do is I don't mix my different hats. I have authorized off-duty employment with the Sheriff's Office, with every administration, that I've had. And I can tell you that there's been a lot of, regarding the actual cases or reported cases, quite a few.
Yeah.
To dealing with SID and those guys, great bunch of guys there, and they work real hard. And
good.
And not just with the SO though, with BSO, with Miami-Dade, with Palm Beach, with Orange County, Hillsborough County, just a lot. Because I'm I traveled quite a bit when I first started this. So that relationship is very defined. There's, I'm a deputy sheriff just like you, and just like, the thousands of other men and women that put their life on the line, and I maintain that integrity, and I never do anything under the color of the sheriff. However, I do have a different hat that I wear, and that's a community leader. So I know how to navigate that. So that's how the relationship's been. Could it be better? Could it have increased, created more opportunity to advance the CVE purpose? Absolutely. There's always opportunity to improve. But for me personally, I've been able to navigate and learn, and see how we have to deal with it. Yeah. But there's so much more that we can do, and hopefully that's what I'm on the show, and we'll talk about that, I guess, when we're ready. But what can we do as law enforcement officers, the ones on the road, what can we do?
As a matter of fact, what my next question before that was going to be the dangers that are actually faced, law enforcement officers face every day. What dangers do we have to actually?
Well, I mean, in the context of CVE, I believe you're asking me.
Right.
Correct?
In context of the CVE.
I mean, our dangers of our job are
no. I know the dangers of our job,
but
in specific, what should the officer that's listening? What are the things that they have to watch out for? What are the dangers that are actually out there that they may not be aware of?
Well, we have fusion centers, and I think a lot of us maybe we rely a lot on our command to share information with us regarding any potential intel of anyone targeting police. We've had several instances that over the last couple of years regarding direct threats to law enforcement here in South Florida. So that's from a particular group or a movement, if you will. Targeting law enforcement. So I think the first thing we have to do as law enforcement is we have to educate ourselves.
Right.
I know we have a hard job. I know we're busy, 65 on calls all the time. But it's important for us to spend a little extra time to educate ourselves. And that information is free, on the internet. And I think it's important to be careful where we're getting information. To educate ourselves. Obviously, the U.S. government are trusted resources, for us to get that information. But just like you said, Tony, yourself, you had no idea about violent extremism and the effort and about countering violent extremism and how many extremist groups there were.
Right.
They're all over the place. So I think the first thing is that the law enforcement agent on the ground should educate themselves about what violent extremism is and all the different angles that it's coming from, right? Another thing that I like to say when I'm talking to law enforcement is we cannot arrest our way out of this problem.
I was going to ask you about that because it would help if I put my microphone on. I was going to ask you about that because in one of the things where we were going to talk about where law enforcement can make a difference, what can agencies do to be safe and make a difference. One of the things that I noticed you had put down that you wanted to discuss was the fact that you can't arrest, your way out of, to make this any better or whatever. Arresting is not going to be the answer to to the problem. So what can law enforcement agencies do to make a difference?
Well, I think from an agency perspective, if I talk bigger first, and then I'll come down to, us, on the road. I think the agencies have to provide equity when they're dealing with their law enforcement agents or their officers. So, as I said, the politics are very difficult, and it really does leave a lot of bad feelings in individuals' pride and their workforce when people are sucked in, and not based on the work performance or what they do, but based on what other people say.
Right.
They're treated differently because of their religion or whatever, their race, whatever it is, or whatever group they're supposedly, involved with, or this and that.
The basics of that we're taught as law enforcement officers to not profile is
Correct.
Exactly what.
Correct. So I think it's important agencies to accomplish that. In the CVE aspect, it's very difficult for agencies to navigate that. Why? Because of the trust issue that the community has to trust. It's important for law enforcement agencies to build real relationships with real members of the community. What does that mean? During my travels, I've seen people, and it happens in politics all the time, but let's say, for instance, let's say the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office wants to establish a relationship with the Muslim community, right? So the Muslim community knows in Palm Beach County who their leadership is and who should be the one contact to get the message out to everyone for equity to everything, right? But what I see a lot of times the agencies do is they pick somebody that knows one or two people, that they know one or two people that are influential and powerful, right? So this becomes a trust issue. So when agencies start picking the onesies or the twosies, the lay community, the majority of the community, and not just in the Muslim community, this is across the board, right? The community does not trust them. This says, hold on, who is this guy? This guy, I've seen this guy maybe one time, or I've never seen him before, and he's a spokesperson for our community, right? Stuff like that. So I think the agencies need to do a better job of making true connections with the actual people in the community, right? From an agency perspective. Next thing is, and I see a lot of this happening now, is the agencies, like that example I gave in Marseille in France when I was there, let the community see a representative of the agency that's from that community. And I see a lot more agencies doing that these days, but there is still a lot more, opportunity, to accomplish that. And then I think that the last thing the agencies should do from a global perspective about countering violent extremism is to educate, because I have never been educated by the SO about CVE. Ever. You haven't. No. Ever. Right? And this is such an important issue that why wouldn't all of us know about that? It doesn't make sense, right? So now we have somebody that's never have it, and you have somebody that's a subject matter expert, and there's too much disparity. There's too much gray area.
Yeah, a lot of gray area.
Yeah, there's a lot of gray area. So I think that from an agency perspective, that any agency would do a better job of explaining that, and in partnering with all of the stakeholders, to accomplish that. So from an agency perspective, I think that would be good. Now, as far as us on the road, we aren't dealing with violent extremists every day. We're just not. Everybody knows that. It's our jobs. We're doing domestic violence calls, we're doing burglaries, we're doing robberies, we're doing rapes. Right. We're not in the realm of the violent extremist. So what do we do? What can we do to make a difference? Right. Number one, like I said, we have to realize we can't arrest our way out of this.
Right.
So that's number one. When we come across a group of individuals or an individual that is so bold that they blatantly tell us that they want to wish harm to a certain group of community, or they use any type of expression that they have, are or will break the law, which would be violence.
Including against us.
Any group, right? Any group. Then we need to do a better job. So what does that mean? Let me give you an example. So let's say, for instance, unfortunately we deal with a lot of racists. Yeah. Different racists from every. It doesn't matter what race, right?
No one in particular.
Yeah, I've been called
been there, done that.
BS cracker. I mean, listen, right? We deal with racists on everywhere, from every race, right? So we deal with that. So now, so how does this deal with countering violent extremism? What does that mean? Okay, so let's say, for instance, I'll tell you one time that I came across, he's a Caucasian guy, he's a white guy, and he was throwing N-bombs and saying this and saying that, and that's not against the law. I can't really say that, but I was just sitting in him. I wear shades when I'm on duty, so he couldn't see what I was doing. I was just, I was looking at him. And then he said, you know what? I want to go shoot, because he was upset that we were being shot. The police were being shot, right? So he was so upset that individual shot an officer that he started to get upset. Like he thought he was building a bond with me, right? Saying that, this officer got shot. Remember the shootings that we're getting executed? Our fellow officers are getting. So he said, and this.
Still
and
happening.
that.
The one guy who was ambushed in a
it happens
serving a warrant.
Frequently. Correct. So him saying that, expressing his frustration, I understand. I certainly don't agree with his point of view, right? His racist point of view, but he can say whatever he wants.
Right.
However, he did turn and express his thoughts about committing violence against a certain group of people. All right. So we hear that more frequently than not. You'd be surprised when I talk to fellow officers and do that. We hear that quite a bit, right? So that's not a freedom of speech issue anymore.
Right. Once.
Correct. You've crossed that line.
Right,
you started.
Turned the page.
You started. You said, okay, this person, this person, that's fine. But hold on, I want to go do this and commit some violence.
Right.
Oh, right. So we talk to them and say, tell me about that, right? So you get that information. We get that intel, and we don't ignore it. I think that's where really us as officers, we have to take that seriously. And we have to report it no matter what. We have to have equity, right? We have to get the people involved that are doing this. So now let's say at the SO we have a threat assessment unit, right? So we have this information, we write our alpha, we get it to the right person. What they do with it is that's their job, right? That's their job. But so officers, we can do that. Another thing that we can do is we can get better at using technology, investigating technology, right? A lot of people are using social media these days. A lot of people are posting things on the internet. A lot of things are instant and come off, right? They post it comes off, so there's no record of it, right? So even myself, like your son's generation right now, if I'm sure if we were asking to ask him to help us investigate something, we need to find something, he'd be like, he'll have it right up. But we're not there yet, right? So I think as officers, we can do better on integrating technology when it comes to CVE into our investigations, right? Even as a single officer, we can do that. We can go on Facebook, we can go on Instagram, we can do all that. We can take screenshots, So that's something that we can, make a conscious effort, or we can partner at an institutional level, right? Something we can do at an institutional level is partner with the technology companies. When it comes to violent extremism, I'm talking about. I'm not talking about violating people's rights. Right. It's very important. When we're talking about someone that has made a conscientious effort, speech, action, or something that they have are or will break the law, that is now when law enforcement gets involved, right? So we can build, relationships with technology companies regarding that, and the technology companies are very protective over everybody's
I was just
going
to say that. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we've seen several examples in the past few years where certain agencies have gone to these companies and said, "We want this information," and they've said no.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and I understand, the violating the rights stuff. It's a long way away. There's a lot of legwork that's going to have to be done, and back and forth, and I don't know. I don't know how long it'll be, but it's not anytime soon.
Well, let me explain to you so you know, and probably the majority of the agencies just don't know this. There's already a working group, the global CVE effort. You have all the big shots there. And I've been to meetings with them, everything, and they want to work with law enforcement, right? So you have Google, you have Facebook, you have YouTube, you have all of these people, these big juggernauts in technology that want to work with law enforcement when it comes to preventing violent extremism. Not profiling based on someone's religious views or their whatever they want, but when it comes to violent extremism. And all we have to do is make that connection and reach out to them.
So what is the connection? What is the holdback? What is the...
First, nobody knows. Like if I was to go ask the majority of the command right now, if they say, hey, did you know that Google, Facebook, YouTube, they're all in the CVE global working group and they're willing to work with law enforcement? No, I had no idea. Because nobody's educated on it. Do you understand? So that's why I'm saying even us, we can educate ourselves in that, and we can, you can, even as a lay officer, you can be involved with CVE as a community member. Right? And you can build those relationships. So technology partnerships are very important. Intervention when appropriate. So what does intervention mean? Intervention means that example that I gave. Remember the guy that said in the church? Now he turned the page when he said, I'm going to blow the church up, right? So we let the appropriate people get involved with that. They investigated. They made a determination he had a mental illness. We got him the help. But there's sometimes when we get information, when we deal with people, when they don't turn the page.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What happens when they don't?
When they don't turn the page. So what do we have to have in place? The SO, we have a lot of good county resources. So we have to know our resources. You got very familiar with them in the CIT training, right? In the crisis intervention training, with Henderson, all these different mental health issues. But sometimes that's not enough. So we need to educate ourselves better on community-run organizations, which there are quite a few, as well as the SO organizations that can deal with intervention and issues like that. So when we're dealing with somebody, that we can get them the help, if they choose to get it.
All right.
Another thing that I can say, because a lot of, we're on the executive side of things. We're taking away people's liberty. We're arresting people.
Right.
On the prosecution side, on that side of law enforcement, I think I've seen quite a bit of overzealous prosecution. So as individuals, as prosecutors, that treat with equity. Remember this word, trust and equity. Trust and equity. So if we can prosecute and not be overzealous in the prosecution, will probably say, if this guy wasn't Muslim, would I prosecute him, right? Would I do this, would do that? I've seen circumstances, let's go back to the trust issue, where we've had religious leaders, and this is real, that were thrown in jail for 2 years here in South Florida. And when the prosecution rested their case, the judge got off the stand and said, I am sorry you have been in jail for 2 years. I cannot in good conscience leave you in jail for one more day. You have had no evidence put forward to you to keep you in. And that's happened. Another individual arrested, put in jail for 1.5 years. Freedom taken away. This is from overzealous prosecution. 1.5 years. This is an American citizen now. And then released with no explanation. You understand?
Yep.
So this type of things create trust. Remember, trust and equity. Trust and equity. So this type of, and for our prosecutors that are watching, that's important, right? If you're treating somebody different based on their nationality, race, religion, gender, then you and yourself are violating the Constitution, right? Because we shouldn't be like that. We should say, you broke the law. This is what we're going off, right? And that's what we're doing. So those are some things that we can do on the local level, to enhance and fight against violent extremism.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. It was a very very informative discussion. I think it was a really good show. I mean, like I said, I knew it was going to last because, like I said, I don't think we were scratching the surface on it. There's so much to learn about it. I mean,
there is.
It's a process. It's going to take time. I mean, but like I said, we need to start somewhere. I'm glad we got to have this talk and stuff.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I want to take a real quick break, and then we're going to come up and we're going to do the show close. And like I said, I'm really glad we had this talk. I'm really glad you got to come in and explain more in detail and give a better understanding to people. And hopefully we gave a better understanding to people. And as law enforcement officers, we have a huge task, and we're everything from counselors, to not only in everyday lives and how people handle their families and stuff like that, but also in grieving.
Yeah.
My favorite line to people is, "You do not want to see what my eyes have seen. You do not want to see what my eyes have seen."
Yeah.
We go through so much and then deal with it and go home. And there was a point in my life where it affected my personal life, and it took my wife waking me up and telling me, bluntly to my face, that I needed to wake up and smell the coffee because of what was happening, and it hurt me. It hurt me bad, And then you got to learn to deal with it, and in a certain way, that it doesn't affect you for the rest of your life, and it doesn't affect you in your day-to-day law enforcement, duties. Getting in that car, having those kind of, thoughts and all this other stuff, and being, because there are racist cops out there, there are criminal, there are crooks, they're stealing. I mean, guys are losing their livelihood for, shoplifting.
Nonsense.
I mean, really,
Yeah.
And another thing is that law enforcement in itself, we have to get back to it actually meaning something to be a law enforcement officer. The oath has to mean something to us, And like I said, I'm out of here in 3 years, 10 months. There's got to be a big change. When it happens, I have no clue, but this is a positive step in the direction where we need to go.
Yeah.
People need to know. They need to educate themselves.
Yeah.
And that's how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
So and maybe you can get to the sheriff and say, hey, listen, maybe let's sit down. Maybe we could do this. Who knows? Maybe start another unit, whatever. Who knows? You only got 7 years in, so you got a while to go too. But that's completely up to you.
Politics.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's a big thing. So let's go ahead and take a quick break. It was a really good show, and we're going to be back with you in just a minute, just a couple of minutes. I really have to take this break though, so we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Did you see that? Whoa, we scored? Yeah, we scored. We're going to the playoffs. I can't believe I missed that. Every time I'm buzzed, I spend too much time on my phone. What? I should take your phone away. No. I'll call for a ride. Hey, why does my face look like that? I'm playing with these new face filters. Okay, you know what? Yep, that's mine. Kevin, I need that back. No. Kevin!
If you love them enough to suck the snot out of their nose at 4 a.m., then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677.
Hey, I see the fingers. All right, we're back. Does anybody know what happened to the Danny?
What happened to the what?
He gave you the finger.
The table in the green room.
I saw Dee come in.
She didn't carry it on her back. It's gone. I went back to go to the bathroom. You know how big the table is.
Yeah,
it's gone.
Really?
Yeah. So I guess Ryan had something to do with it. Oh, anyway, lots of fun tonight. Welcome back to Copservations. The discussion tonight has been countering violent extremism. I'd like to thank our very special guest and my partner out on the streets there during the day, Nezar Hamze.
Thanks
or
for having
Hammer.
me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. It really was a good show. I hope you come back and join us sometime because
absolutely.
it was very, very informative. Before I close with our tribute to the fallen, I'd like to share some final words with you that I found pertaining to tonight's topic. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution protects the freedoms of speech, press, religion, and assembly. It is important to remember that extremism and radicalization themselves are not crimes, as long as individuals and groups do not partake in or facilitate acts of violence or crimes. Even those who possess or espouse the most heinous of views must be protected. Community policing is best positioned to achieve the dual goals of protecting communities from attacks and protecting civil rights and liberties. The moral example set by the freedoms in the Constitution must never be outshined by suspicion or the desire to silence ideologies that are not considered mainstream. The freedoms of speech, press, religion, and assembly should never be repressed because they are perceived to be violent or offensive. The law enforcement oath of honor includes the commitment to always uphold the Constitution, and that must remain true regardless of the circumstances. As always, before we sign off, we'd like to honor our fallen brothers and sisters. Tonight, we honor one of our own, Deputy Sheriff Paul Ryan of the Broward County Sheriff's Office, whose end of watch was on this day, November 7th, back in 2007. I'm a little emotional with this because I was on that call searching for this guy that was driving around. Deputy Ryan was shot and killed by a prisoner he was transporting in the medical van to the Broward County Courthouse. The prisoner, Michael Mazza, had been serving a life sentence from a previous conviction and was en route for trial on robbery charges. Mazza was riding in a medical transport van because he claimed to be having back pain. During the transport, Mazza was able to overpower Deputy Ryan, take control of his service weapon, and shoot Deputy Ryan twice. He fled, leaving Deputy Ryan for dead in the parking lot at the intersection of Powerline Road and Hammondville Road in Pompano Beach. Several citizens called 911, and deputy responded to find Deputy Ryan wounded. Deputy Ryan was transported to the local hospital, where he succumbed to his wounds. Mazza was captured after a citizen saw him at a pawn shop and alerted police. He was in possession of Deputy Ryan's service weapon when he was arrested. He was charged with first-degree murder and escape. On February 28, 2011, Mazza pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received another life sentence. Deputy Paul Ryan, a U.S. Army veteran, had served with the Broward County Sheriff's Office for 20 years. He is survived by his wife and 2 sons. The Broward County Detention Center on Blount Road displays Deputy Paul Ryan's name in his honor. Be sure to tune in next Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on our Copservation podcast feed. Copservation.
It's okay, you got
podcast.
emotional. It's okay. We're with you. We're with
Yeah.
you.
Facebook page, the Copservation channel on the Metaphor Creative Media YouTube page, and now on Twitter, at Copservations_. Thank you for tuning in. Until next week, stay safe and God bless.